We followed a stray dog for a day. What we found will surprise you. I never expected a ragged, mud-streaked dog to shatter every conviction I held about compassion, loyalty, and the elusive magic that stitches humanity together. It happened on a chilly autumn morning, the kind that smells like damp leaves and hidden secrets, where the world feels perched on the edge of something monumental. The day's promise was painted across the sky in smears of lavender, pink, and gold as the sun struggled to climb above the rooftops. In retrospect, that sunrise felt prophetic, like it was ushering me into a story I was meant to live rather than merely observe. I first spotted the stray dog by the corner of Maudlin Avenue, rummaging through a scattered heap of trash bags, its coarse fur matted with dirt and dried leaves. There was nothing especially remarkable at first glance, just a bony creature hunched over a broken styrofoam container, but something about the way it moved caught my eye. It seemed deliberate, almost purposeful, not merely driven by hunger but by something deeper. And when it lifted its head to glance at me, I saw a strange mixture of defiance and sorrow in its eyes. The dog held my gaze for a few heartbeats before turning and trotting away with an unhurried pace, as though it knew exactly where it was going. I can't explain why, but I felt compelled to follow it. Maybe it was the morning's atmosphere, heavy with the possibility of new revelations. Maybe it was the dog's expression. It looked half-starved yet strangely resolute, like a lone traveler determined to complete its journey despite the odds. Or perhaps it was my own restless heart that told me something extraordinary lay behind that ragged fur and those keen eyes. Whatever the reason, I found myself trailing behind the dog, half excited and half terrified of where this unexpected pursuit might lead. We passed a closed florist's shop, its window stuffed with drooping daisies still fresh from the day before. I paused for a moment as the dog disappeared around the corner, unsure whether to actually continue. But curiosity burned brighter in me than caution. There was a tug, an unspoken promise that if I only kept following, I might witness something unforgettable. So I hastened my steps and traced the dog's path down an alley with walls painted in graffiti that looked like cryptic messages from another world. The alley smelled of stale beer and wet cardboard, typical of the city's neglected side streets. Yet I noticed how the dog's paws navigated the filthy puddles with quiet grace, as though it was dancing through a labyrinth invisible to the rest of us. Before I knew it, that single decision, to follow a stray dog, had begun to unravel my day in ways I never dreamed. My mundane plans evaporated, replaced by the thrumming of my heart and the relentless question, where on earth is it going? The dog led me past a row of abandoned storefronts with boarded-up windows and rotting signs. These were places I'd always hurried by, never pausing to wonder what memories they held. But as I trailed behind the dog, each forgotten building seemed to breathe a story, as though echoing with ghosts of better days. The wind pressed cold fingers against my cheeks. My eyes were locked on the dog's swaying tail, the only thing guiding me forward. It felt like stepping into a hidden dimension, an urban wilderness where daily life had paused. Eventually, I found the dog paused at a concrete drainage pipe. It stuck its nose inside, sniffed a moment, then continued on as though disappointed. I crept closer, noticing a tattered blanket and empty cans inside the pipe. Someone had been sleeping there. My heart clenched. Whoever had made this place home was nowhere to be seen. A question flickered through my mind. Was the dog searching for them, or was this pipe merely a checkpoint in its routine? I felt both sadness and a flicker of guilt. Had I judged this stray too quickly as a simple hungry creature when it might be on an urgent mission of its own? The dog's pace quickened, leading me through a labyrinth of residential backstreets. As we crossed a small community park dotted with balding grass, a group of kids hopped off the swings to chase the dog for a few steps. The dog stiffened, ears pinned back, obviously no stranger to shooting and shouting. But it didn't run. It almost seemed to sigh as if it expected cruelty. Then, when the children's interest waned, the dog continued onward, paying them no further heed. Observing this exchange jolted something within me. This animal had likely endured countless moments of dismissal and threat, yet still it pressed forward, driven by something that remained a mystery to me. Dawn slipped into early morning, and the bustle of city life began to form around us like a rising tide. Delivery trucks rattled by, store owners rolled up metal shutters, and bleary-eyed commuters trudged to the bus stops. Yet I remained invisible to them, a silent spectator stepping in and out of the normal flow. The dog wove between slow-moving cars and scampered away from the occasional human foot that kicked in its direction. That quiet resilience, it struck me. I couldn't shake the sense that I was witnessing a kind of journey that was both heartbreakingly common to strays and astoundingly unique to this particular dog. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a reminder about a meeting at work. I glanced at the time, feeling a ripple of anxiety, but the compulsion was stronger than any sense of responsibility. I sensed that if I abandoned this pursuit now, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering what would have happened if I had just kept going. So I silenced the phone and told myself, just a little longer. Just until I see where this dog is really headed. That little longer would stretch into an entire day, unraveling realities I never dreamed of. The dog turned sharply down a street lined with narrow, cheaply constructed apartment blocks. Laundry fluttered on the balconies above, and the smell of sizzling onions and garlic wafted through open windows. I heard a couple arguing in a language I didn't recognize. A cat leapt from a windowsill to a nearby trash can, hissing at our trespass. Meanwhile, the dog sprinted to the base of a set of concrete steps leading up to a dilapidated door. My heart pounded. Was this its home? Did it belong to someone after all? But the dog did not ascend the steps. Instead, it paused at the foot, peering through the rusted railing as if waiting for someone inside to appear. When nothing happened, it emitted a short whine, circled once and trotted away. A woman stepped out of the building at that moment, nearly tripping over the dog. She shrieked and kicked in its direction. The dog yelped, but it didn't lunge or bark. It merely backed away. An ache rushed through my chest. Clearly, this woman felt nothing but annoyance toward an intruder. I approached to ask if she recognized the dog, but she shot me a hard glare and stomped away. The dog didn't linger. It had lost interest in that place or been forced away. It continued onward, and I, strangely bound to its path, followed. Late morning light filtered through shifting clouds, painting the street in bright gold one moment and a muted gray the next. A gentle breeze carried the smell of coffee grounds from a nearby, momentarily reminding me of a normal life that felt far from this side quest. Somewhere, people were sipping lattes and scrolling through their phones, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding in the alleys. The dog ducked behind a battered fence, and I nearly lost it until I squeezed through a gap in the boards. On the other side, I discovered a small open yard filled with rubble, tufts of weeds, and a large shipping container set at an awkward angle. The dog was barking softly at the container's rusted door. When I dared to step closer, I heard muffled shuffling inside. My pulse was hammered. Was this a shelter for people? The dog pawed at the base of the container, whining now with urgency. Carefully, I circled to a small opening. Inside, I made out scattered objects in the dim light. A sleeping bag, an old suitcase, and the faint shape of a person curled up with a tattered coat draped over them. My throat tightened. Homelessness was rampant here, but I'd never been this close to it, never seen the fragile reality of someone's entire existence crammed into a shipping container. The dog barked again, more insistent. I heard a cough, followed by the rustle of movement. A face emerged from the shadows, gaunt and lined with wear, a man who looked older than his likely years. He blinked in the sunlight, disoriented, and then recognized the dog. "There you are," he murmured, his voice croaking. I wasn't sure if he was speaking to me or the dog, but the dog wagged its tail frantically. The man, shaky and weak, inched forward and opened a small can of something that looked like processed meat. The dog devoured it in seconds, tail still wagging in gratitude. A bubble of warmth welled up inside my chest, overshadowed by a pang of sorrow. This stray was not entirely alone. Here was a friend, a companion in misfortune. Moments later, I introduced myself softly, not wanting to spook the man. He eyed me with caution, unsure of my intent. I explained I had been following the dog, curious about its routine. The man, who introduced himself as Hal, offered a wry smile. "She's a smart one," he said, gently patting the dog's head. "Been after me for a while now. I don't own her, but we've got an understanding." "Why did she leave you earlier?" I asked, my heart still pounding with adrenaline. Hal shrugged, his eyes drifting. "Sometimes she roams the city, checking spots. Maybe places she used to know before we met. Don't know for sure. She always comes back, though. Always." His words carried a note of awe, like he still couldn't believe a creature would care enough to return. It struck me that, in a world where so many humans step over or around people like Hal, a stray dog had made him part of its pack. As Hal spoke, the dog rubbed its side against his leg, then trotted out of the container, as if beckoning him to follow. Hal rose with difficulty, wincing as he supported himself on the container's edge. I found myself offering him an arm, which he accepted after a brief hesitation. Together, the three of us left the yard, stepping back through the fence gap. I imagined how strange we must look. A stray dog, a homeless man, and a random stranger drawn into their orbit. We walked slowly, Hal because of his frailty, me because I was uncertain of everything. The dog kept glancing back as if ensuring we stayed close. We ambled through a warren of streets. Hal mentioned he sometimes tried to panhandle near the busier downtown avenues, but that people were more likely to chase him away than spare him a coin. We passed a half-demolished building with graffiti proclaiming hope in bright red letters. It felt like a mocking invitation, a reminder that hope was easy to scrawl but harder to live. All the while, the dog remained oddly vigilant, scanning the surroundings. Occasionally, it would dart ahead to sniff at a door or peer into a cranny. Hal said that sometimes she found scraps or half-eaten sandwiches from a diner's dumpster. He called the dog Lucy, a name that sounded too soft for such a grizzled creature, yet somehow perfect. He'd chosen it, he said, because it reminded him of light in the darkness. Lucy. I rolled the name around in my mouth and found it fitting that I had been lured into this day by a dog named for illumination. It was midday by then, and the sun was high, beating down on the cracked pavement. Hal removed his coat and slung it over his arm, his bony shoulders trembling slightly. I could see that his lips were chapped, his cheeks hollow. I regretted not bringing any water with me, so I suggested we find somewhere to buy a bottle. Hal seemed appreciative of the offer, but he also looked shamefaced, as though he felt unworthy. We found a small convenience store, the kind with barred windows, and I bought us a few bottles of water and some simple snacks. The clerk looked at Hal with a mixture of suspicion and pity, but she accepted my money without comment. Lucy waited outside, tail wagging when she spotted us again. Hal took a few sips, passing the bottle to Lucy so she could lap at the opening. Then, after a few moments of rest, Lucy set off again. Hal hesitated. She might be heading to the old station, he said, though he didn't elaborate on what was there. Curious, I pushed him to explain, and he said something about a hidden corner behind the station platform that offered shelter from wind, and sometimes had leftover food from. If you didn't mind the rats, he joked, it was a decent spot. But Lucy often ventured there alone, as if patrolling her territory. We pressed on, turning onto a wider street filled with the roar of traffic. Car horns and the chatter of lunchtime crowds created a cacophony that made our small trio feel invisible. No one seemed to notice the man with tattered clothes and the stray dog weaving through the throng. I paid attention to how Hal winced when shrank from him, and how Lucy never let them fully slip out of her sight. It was heartbreaking to realize that, In a city so densely packed with people, loneliness could be as vast as the night sky. At the entrance to the old train station, Lucy took off at a brisk trot, leaving Hal behind. We lost sight of her among the columns and the swirl of travelers. My chest tightened with worry that we'd lost our link to her story. But Hal, unperturbed, guided me around the side of the station, behind a stack of shipping pallets, to a makeshift nook. And there she was, sniffing around an overturned trash bin. The station's side alley had once been a freight loading zone, now abandoned except for the occasional car that parked illegally. Lucy pawed at something among the trash, then let out a triumphant bark, proudly dragging out a half-wrapped sandwich, battered but still edible enough for a hungry stray. She dropped it at Hal's feet, tail swishing in delight, and I realized she was sharing her find, or perhaps offering it like a gift. Hal patted her head in thanks, took a careful bite, and saved the rest for later. I felt a raw sting behind my eyes. I tried to mask it, but Lucy gave me a quizzical look, like she understood more than I expected. Here was a dog that had nobody and nothing in the conventional sense, yet insisted on caring for this man. "She came into my life about 2 weeks ago," Hal said softly. "I was half frozen one night. She curled right up next to me, kept me warm. I gave her the only thing I had left, my last piece of jerky. Ever since she comes and goes, but she always finds me." We lingered by the station for a while. Hal recounted scraps of his story, how he'd lost his job, then his family, and eventually found himself adrift. Each word felt heavy, interspersed with humility and acceptance. Lucy chewed on a piece of cardboard, apparently uninterested in the details, but deeply protective of Hal's presence. As for me, I found myself caught in the swirl of emotions: pity, anger at a system that allows such misfortune, gratitude that I was even there to witness this unlikely bond. And I couldn't ignore the continued pull in my chest that urged me to keep following Lucy, wherever she went next. Mid-afternoon arrived with a subtle cooling in the air. A gentle breeze seemed to sweep away the city's midday mania, leaving a quieter, more introspective energy. Hal rubbed his thin arms, looking exhausted. I suggested we find him a place to rest, maybe a shelter, but he waved me off, explaining that the local shelters had time limits, strict rules, or they were overcrowded. Lucy let out a low whine as if echoing our frustration. The dog rose, did a little shake, and trotted toward the far end of the station. Hal looked at me questioningly, then followed. So did I. We wound through a path littered with broken glass, detouring around a fenced-off construction site. Lucy stopped briefly at a chain-link fence to bark at something on the other side, maybe a squirrel or a cat. Then she carried on, relentless in her forward motion. There was a sense of urgency in her stride now. I caught up, hearing the scuff of Hal's shoes behind me. My heart thumped. Something was shifting. I couldn't name what, but the dog's energy felt more focused, like we were approaching a place of significance. Eventually, we emerged onto a quieter street lined with closed shops that looked like they had been shuttered for years. Broken windows, graffiti-splashed walls. Not a soul in sight. Lucy sniffed around a narrow alley, then darted down it. I exchanged a glance with Hal before we ducked into the alley, heartbeats hammering in unison. At first it seemed deserted, just another trash-laden corridor in an uncaring city. But Lucy was zeroed in on something near a stack of wooden crates. She approached slowly, ears pinned back. A small whimper escaped her muzzle, an expression of concern I'd never heard before. I followed, picking my way over soggy cardboard, and then I saw what had caught Lucy's attention. Another stray dog, smaller, lying on its side, breathing in shallow gasps. Everything froze in my mind. The smaller dog was a dusty caramel color, its fur caked with mud and blood. A long gash extended down its flank, raw and gruesome. Its eyes, half-lidded, flicked weakly in Lucy's direction. Lucy let out a keening sound, gently nudging the injured dog's shoulder with her snout. No response, aside from a feeble twitch. My stomach lurched and Hal let out a quiet curse under his breath. This was dire. Instinctively, I knelt beside the wounded dog, ignoring the grime. Lucy stood watch, tail drooping. Hal crouched down, wincing at the sight. "We should get help," I managed to say, trying not to sound panicked. "But who do we call? Animal control might take hours, or they might just put the dog down if it's too injured." My mind spun. Then I remembered a local rescue center, a makeshift place run by volunteers who cared for stray animals. I'd read about them in a local blog. If they were still around, they might help. I dug my phone from my pocket, ignoring the slight tremor in my hand as I scrolled for the number. Lucy nudged my leg, a pleading look in her eyes as though urging me to hurry. I quickly phoned the rescue. A woman answered, sounding flustered but kind. I explained the situation. She said they had limited staff, but if I could bring the dog over, they'd do what they could. Her voice was gentle, resonating with the compassion Lucy's eyes mirrored. "How do we get her there?" Hal whispered, glancing around. We had no car, no safe means of transportation. Then I remembered, only about a 10-minute walk away was a friend's apartment. Perhaps my friend still had that old wagon we used for hauling groceries. Or maybe I could borrow a car. With Lucy pacing anxiously, I decided to take the risk. I told Hal to wait with the dogs while I sprinted off to find help. He nodded, eyes full of fear for the injured pup. Those 10 minutes felt like an eternity. I sprinted until my lungs burned, weaving around pedestrians who barely registered my urgency. My friend answered the door, startled by my disheveled appearance. Words tumbled from my lips in a flood of desperation as I explained the crisis. He didn't hesitate. We hopped into his old sedan, barely functional, but it still ran, and raced back to the alley. On the way, I explained we had to transport an injured stray dog to the rescue center. He nodded, jaw set with determination. Pulling into that narrow side street was awkward, but we managed to nose in close enough to the alley. I leapt out, nearly tripping over broken pavement. Hal was there, cradling the injured dog's head gently in his lap. Lucy stood over them, trembling with concern. Together, we carefully lifted the dog into the car's backseat. My friend spread out towels, rummaging for a first aid kit. Lucy, though obviously anxious, actually cooperated, stepping out of the way until we had the wounded dog situated. Then, as if reluctant to let it out of her sight, she tried to climb into the backseat too. "She can come with us," my friend said softly, opening the other passenger door. Lucy hopped in, settling on the floor. I'd never seen a dog so fixated on another's well-being. Hal squeezed into the back as well, stroking the injured dog's ears. I took the front seat, my heart pounding against my ribs. The car felt cramped, the air thick with the tang of blood and unspoken dread. My friend eased down on the gas, navigating the potholed street as gently as possible. I glanced back, feeling the dog's labored breathing rattle through my own chest. Lucy's eyes met mine, wide, worried, full of an almost human plea. The drive seemed endless, though it was probably only 5 minutes. When we finally pulled up to the rescue center, a small, nondescript brick building with a hand-painted sign, volunteers were already waiting outside, alerted by my phone call. A slender woman with short-cropped hair approached the car, flanked by 2 younger men carrying a stretcher. Gently, they transferred the injured dog, rushing it inside while the rest of us trailed behind. Lucy tried to follow, but the woman blocked her. Concerned for the dog's safety, they needed space to triage. Lucy whined and scratched at the door, refusing to be separated. Hal took Lucy into his arms, whispering soft assurances. I felt tears prick my eyes, overwhelmed by the sincerity of that moment. A homeless man, a stray dog, and another dog clinging to life, all of us fused by a single thread of compassion. We stood there helpless as the volunteers worked in the back room, administering first aid, hooking up IVs, and checking vital signs. Time dragged. Occasionally, someone hurried in and out, grabbing supplies or whispering instructions. Lucy paced, ignoring our attempts to calm her. Every nerve in my body was taut with worry. After what felt like hours, the same woman emerged, wiping her brow. She had a cautious smile. "We've stabilized her," she said. "She lost a lot of blood and has a nasty cut that might be infected, but she's strong enough that we think she'll pull through if she gets proper care." A collective exhale filled the cramped reception area. Lucy seemed to sense the shift in mood. Her tail wagged, though it was subdued, like she understood we weren't entirely out of danger yet. Hal slumped into a plastic chair, eyes closing in relief. My friend gave me a tired grin as though to say, "We did something good today." But the story was far from over. The rescue center was willing to treat the injured pup for the short term. What about long-term care? Would she be put up for adoption? Did she have an owner who was still searching for her? And what about Lucy and Hal? So many threads to unravel. The woman at the desk asked me if I wanted to sign some intake forms, but since I wasn't the dog's owner, she offered a standard procedure. The dog would be treated, vaccinated, and put up for adoption if unclaimed. "She deserves a real home," the woman said, scribbling notes. I glanced at Hal, whose eyes flicked with a mixture of hope and despair. He knew he couldn't provide a stable home, not when he himself lived in a shipping container. Lucy, as always, stared at him, then at me, like she was waiting for us to solve the puzzle. I'm not sure what overcame me, but I blurted out, "I'll cover her treatment, and if nobody claims her, I'll foster her until we find her a permanent home." The words spilled out before I had time to analyze their weight. But I meant them. My heart hammered with the enormity of the commitment, yet it also felt strangely right, like some cosmic alignment was happening. The volunteers thanked me. Hal looked close to tears, and Lucy wagged her tail in approval. The sense of relief in that moment was profound, but it left me wondering what would happen to Hal, and for that matter, Lucy. I could guess Lucy wouldn't leave Hal's side. And Hal, obviously touched by what he'd witnessed, seemed uncertain where he fit into it all. My friend hovered nearby, checking his phone. We needed to move the car. Life was creeping in, practicalities, responsibilities, all the stuff that never seems to pause for extraordinary moments. Eventually, we stepped outside, blinking in the fading afternoon light. Lucy pressed her nose to the door, as if refusing to budge from the building where her new friend lay. Hal crouched and coaxed her away gently. "She's safe now," he whispered. "They'll look after her." Lucy stared at him, and for a moment her eyes glistened. Then she slowly turned and followed him down the steps. I realized I had to get back to my own life, the day I'd left in tatters hours ago. But how could I just walk away now? My friend, sensing my turmoil, patted my shoulder. "We can drop Hal wherever he needs to go." Hal smiled weakly, offered a quiet thanks, then mumbled that he'd be heading back to the container. "I just need to rest," he said, "and Elle come find me, or maybe she'll keep an eye on that pup here." He tried to sound lighthearted, but the fatigue in his voice was palpable. We got into the car, Lucy wedging herself beside Hal in the back seat. The short drive to Hal's shipping container felt bittersweet. Once we parked, Hal stepped out, Lucy following. He turned to me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. It was part gratitude, part longing, and part acceptance. "Thank you," he said. "I'd have lost that poor dog if not for you. Lucy here, she's special. Don't know why she does what she does, but I'm glad she does it. Maybe you should look after her too." Something about his words made my throat tighten. I was tempted to invite him, both of them, to stay with me at least for the night. But I was in no position to offer such a huge shift, plus Hal's pride was evident. He likely wouldn't accept. Instead, I pulled a scrap of paper from my wallet, scribbled my phone number. "If you need anything, Hal," I said, pressing it into his hand, "call me. I mean it. And if Lucy needs anything or you want updates on the other dog, you let me know." Hal nodded, slipping the paper carefully into his pocket. Lucy placed her paws up on the car door, looking at me with an intensity that made me swear she understood every word. She gave a small bark, as if to say goodbye. Then Hal and Lucy retreated into the twilight, heading toward that makeshift home by the shipping container. My friend sighed, started the engine and turned the car around. My mind buzzed with 1,000 questions. I felt changed, like the city's hidden world had revealed itself to me in the shape of 2 stray dogs and a lonely man. That night, I couldn't sleep. The images swirled in my head. Lucy's insistent eyes, Hal's haunted face, the injured dog's labored breathing. A swirling mixture of hope and sadness made my chest feel tight. I tossed and turned, replaying the day's events in my mind, fixated on the miraculous chain of coincidences that had led me from a simple morning walk to a near life-or-death rescue. Was it fate, or just a random intersection of broken souls that needed each other? By dawn, I made up my mind to check on the injured dog at the rescue center. It was early, but I couldn't wait any longer. The city felt quieter at that hour, bathed in soft morning light. As I pushed open the rescue center's door, a familiar volunteer, one of the young men from the day before, greeted me. He recognized me immediately and offered a kind smile. "She's doing okay. Feels like she's stabilizing." Relief flowed through me like warm water. He led me to the back where the dog lay in a large kennel with clean towels. There was a bandage on her flank, and she looked drowsy but alert enough to lift her head when I approached. My heart clenched seeing her bound up like that, though I was grateful she was alive. I watched her for a moment, offering gentle words of comfort. She didn't cower, but there was a sadness in her eyes, like she couldn't quite process why someone was being kind to her. After a few minutes, I asked if Lucy or Hal had shown up. The volunteer shook his head, explaining that they hadn't seen either. The dog had whimpered some during the night, as if missing a companion, but it had calmed when the staff gave gentle affection. I wondered if Lucy had meant to come, but got deterred by Hal's condition or the city's dangers. Deciding I'd try to find them later, I stayed a bit longer to watch the dog settle. One of the staff members said they would run tests to be sure there wasn't any underlying infection. I left a small donation to help cover expenses on top of my promise to pay for the dog's treatment. As I exited, the world felt sharper, more significant. The rescue staff gave me updates. With a few days of antibiotics and rest, the dog stood a good chance of recovery. A flicker of hope stirred in me. Maybe I'd eventually adopt her or find her a loving home if Lucy and Hal couldn't take her in. But a bigger question loomed. How to help Hal, who had confided that Lucy came and went, but rarely spent nights away from him. What if Lucy was out looking for help again, or scrounging for scraps? My boss had probably noticed my absence the day before, but I resolved to take another day off if necessary. There are times when life demands your full attention outside of spreadsheets and meetings. This felt like one of those times. I hopped on a bus and headed back toward the shipping container. I had no guarantee Hal would still be there, but I had to try. Wind rattled the bus's windows, carrying a chill that settled into my bones. My nerves jangled with every passing moment, uncertain what I might find. When the bus lurched to a stop near Hal's area, I hopped off and made my way through the gritty streets to the yard with the tilted shipping container. At first glance, it looked deserted. My stomach sank. But as I rounded the corner, I caught sight of Lucy. She was curled up by the container's entrance. Her tail thumped at the sound of my footsteps. Hal was inside, rummaging through what little belongings he had. He emerged, looking startled but not unhappy to see me. In the daylight, the lines on his face seemed deeper, his shoulders more slumped. Lucy bounded over, pressing her nose to my hand. "She tried to leave this morning," Hal said quietly. "I think she wanted to check on that other dog, but she didn't want to go alone." I knelt to pat Lucy's head, feeling her trembling slightly. Hal explained that he was worried about taking Lucy to the rescue center because he'd had run-ins before with animal control. "I don't want them to take her away," he confided. "She's the only friend I've got." I shook my head, trying to reassure him that this was a different situation, that we wouldn't let them take Lucy from him. Hal looked unconvinced. "How about I go with you?" I offered. "We'll check on the pup together, and I'll explain to the staff that Lucy's yours, or at least you two share a bond." and that you just want to see how her friend is doing." Hal hesitated, glancing around at his possessions like he was afraid to leave them. But Lucy barked softly, as if urging him. Finally, he relented. I told him I'd pay for a cab, but he shook his head, worried that the driver would refuse him because of his appearance. So we set out on foot. It wasn't far, maybe a 20-minute walk. Lucy trotted at Hal's side, occasionally pressing against his leg as if lending him strength. The journey was subdued. Hal asked a few questions about the dog's condition. I told him everything I knew, her stable vitals, the plan for antibiotics. He nodded, seeming relieved. Then he quietly admitted something that startled me. "Lucy's not the first stray I've known. There was another dog that used to keep me company last winter. One day, it just never came back. I sometimes wonder if something happened to it or if it just found a better life. I hope it did. But I never got to say goodbye." My chest tightened. How many heartbreaks had this man endured, silent and unseen by a society always in a hurry? Lucy paused to sniff a lamppost, indifferent to the swirl of human emotions. Hal sighed, eyes haunted by memories he didn't share. I felt a surge of protective resolve. If there was a way to ensure Lucy didn't vanish on him, or that he and Lucy wouldn't be separated, I wanted to find it. When we reached the rescue center, Lucy recognized the place immediately, tensing at the doorway. The same volunteer greeted us, eyeing Hal's worn clothes but offering a sympathetic smile. Lucy whined, straining to see where the injured dog was kept. The volunteer beckoned us to follow. Once inside, we found the pup awake, her bandaged side rising and falling with gentle breaths. She perked up at the sight of Lucy, who trotted over to the kennel gate, tail wagging. A moment of silent communication passed between them, like old friends meeting again. The wounded dog thumped her tail on the towel. Lucy pressed her nose through the bars, softly whining. Hal stood back, hands in his pockets, face creased with concern. The volunteer pointed to the pup's chart. "She's responding well to treatment," he explained. "But she'll need rest and possibly surgery if there's any damage we haven't detected yet." Hal listened intently, nodding, though I wasn't sure he grasped all the medical details. Still, the relief on his face was clear. The volunteer turned to me. "Are you still willing to sponsor her care?" I nodded without hesitation. Hal's eyes flicked to me, brimming with gratitude and something that looked like guilt. "I can't repay you," he started. I cut him off gently, shaking my head. "You already have," I said, though I couldn't quite articulate why. It was enough that he'd shown me a perspective I'd have remained blind to if I hadn't followed Lucy. I'd gained something priceless. Lucy lingered by the kennel, refusing to budge. Eventually, we coaxed her away, promising she could return. Hal asked if they needed any help around the center, maybe some cleaning or manual labor. The volunteer hesitated, then said he'd speak to the manager. "We're volunteer-run," he said, "but we always need an extra set of hands. If you're looking to help, we might figure something out." A cautious hope lit Hal's eyes. For a man who'd been cast aside, this offer, no matter how small, must have felt like a glimpse of possibility. We left the center in a subdued state of solace. A large chunk of the day had passed in that building's cramped corridors. Lucy kept glancing back, her posture stiff as though she hated leaving the other dog. But she stuck close to Hal, never straying far from his side. We paused at a small park bench near the bus stop, collectively exhaustive, physically and emotionally. I offered Hal some of the snacks I'd packed, which he shared with Lucy. As they ate, I watched the people rushing to catch buses or heading home from lunch breaks. None of them spared us more than a fleeting glance, unaware of the deeply moving reality perched on that bench. After finishing our makeshift meal, Hal said quietly, "I don't want Lucy to roam the streets forever. But I don't know how to fix this, how to change my situation." He looked at Lucy, sadness etched on his features. "She's the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. And now, that other dog, too, feels like, I don't know. Feels like fate, maybe." I placed a hand on his shoulder. If you want to try working with the rescue center, we can see if that leads to something more stable. I could help you find resources for housing. There are programs, though they can be complicated. My words felt clumsy, but they were heartfelt. Hal nodded, rubbing Lucy's ears. I'd like that, he said simply. I'm tired of living like this. Lucy licked his hand in silent agreement. Those next few days unfolded like a tapestry of small miracles. The rescue center manager agreed to let Hal volunteer in exchange for store credit at a nearby pet supply shop. It wasn't cash, but it meant Lucy would have steady food, and Hal had a place to be, a sense of purpose. I accompanied Hal to a local outreach group that specializes in getting people off the streets. At first, he was overwhelmed, uneasy around the bureaucracy. Lucy waited outside, restless. But step by step, we began piecing together possibilities. There was a chance Hal could get into a transitional housing program, though the waiting list was long. He didn't have a phone, so he wrote down the rescue center's number as a contact. Meanwhile, the injured dog was steadily improving. They'd named her Cinnamon because of her fur's warm hue. Cinnamon's energy began returning, her eyes brightening whenever Lucy visited. Watching Lucy greet her was like witnessing an unspoken vow of friendship, two strays finding solace in each other's presence. The rescue staff marveled at Lucy's attentiveness, half joking that they should hire Lucy as an emotional support dog. Hal would laugh softly, the sound tinged with pride. Throughout those days, I found myself knitting together a community I never knew existed. The rescue center volunteers, the outreach workers, my friend who'd driven us that first day. These people came alive as vivid threads in a tapestry of compassion. I donated more supplies to the center, spent time with Hal listening to his stories, and took Lucy for short walks around the block. She was always well behaved, likely from years of survival. People who normally recoiled from stray dogs found themselves reaching out to pet Lucy, enchanted by her gentle eyes. In turn, Lucy seemed to sense Hal's blossoming hope. And then, about a week after the dramatic rescue, we hit a turning point. The rescue center called to say Cinnamon was ready for discharge if she could go to a stable home environment, at least a foster situation. Otherwise, they'd keep her a bit longer, but the space was tight. I was torn. My apartment allowed pets, but I knew nothing of raising a dog with a traumatic past. Lucy obviously wanted to remain with Hal, but Hal's living situation was still in flux, and the container wasn't remotely safe or sanitary for Cinnamon. It felt like an impossible puzzle. I broached the subject with Hal, his face clouded with anxiety. If I could, I'd take her, but I can't. Not yet anyway. Lucy pressed against his leg as if offering comfort. We sat on the steps of the rescue center, hearts heavy, until a voice startled us. One of the volunteers came out, a middle-aged man named who had seen our predicament from inside. Clearing his throat, he said, "I might be able to help." We turned to him, eyes wide with anticipation, explained that he owned a small fixer-upper house with a fenced yard. "I already have 2 dogs. Another one wouldn't be easy, but they're friendly and my wife's a softie. We could foster Cinnamon until she's fully recovered. Then, if Hal's situation improves, or if another permanent adopter comes along, great. But at least she's safe in the meantime." A wave of gratitude swept through me so powerful that I struggled to find words. Hal swallowed hard, blinking against tears. "You do that?" he whispered, nodded, his expression resolute. "Yeah, man, the world's tough enough. We gotta help each other when we can." Lucy barked happily as though seconding the motion. That very evening, Cinnamon moved to home. We accompanied her on the ride there, Lucy curled up in Hal's lap, every muscle taut with anticipation. Upon arrival, we introduced Cinnamon to other dogs, an older lab mix and an energetic terrier. They sniffed each other warily, tails slowly wagging. Cinnamon was still weak, but she tried to keep up with the terrier's playful hops. It melted my heart to see her in a place that felt safe, a yard with real grass, warm lights glowing from the windows. We spent an hour chatting with and his wife, going over care instructions. Hal hovered protectively near Cinnamon, half smiling at the domestic scene, half gripped by longing. When it was time to leave, Lucy refused to budge from the yard. Hal had to gently guide her away, promising they'd return to visit. She eventually followed, though she kept glancing back at Cinnamon as if uncertain about leaving her behind. Watching Lucy's devotion hammered home how profound an animal's loyalty can be, how their hearts, though silent, speak volumes through action. A few days later, the outreach program came through unexpectedly. A short-term transitional housing bed had opened up, and Hal's name was at the top of the list. The arrangement was modest, a dorm-style room with communal facilities, but it was a step away from the streets. The only issue: they had a strict no-pets policy. Hal was crestfallen, thinking immediately of Lucy. "I can't leave her," he said quietly, a desperate light in his eyes, but Lucy wasn't just a pet. She was a stray that had chosen Hal. If he abandoned her, everything they'd built would dissolve. We approached the rescue center manager, explained the dilemma, and asked if Lucy could be fostered there temporarily, just until Hal got on his feet. Surprisingly, the manager didn't dismiss the idea. "She's not like a typical stray. We can try to see if she can stay here short-term, though she'll have to be around other dogs. But I have to warn you, it might stress her out." Hal's shoulders sagged. He had no good choices: refuse the bed and stay on the streets with Lucy, or temporarily separate from the one soul who'd saved him from utter isolation. That night Hal and I had a long talk over lukewarm coffee at a small that didn't mind us staying as closing time neared. Lucy lay at his feet, dozing, tired from the day's events. "What's best for her?" he asked me, voice strained. "Would she hate me for leaving her?" I looked at Lucy's sleeping form, her muzzle resting on Hal's worn sneaker. "She chose you once. She won't forget you." My chest felt tight. I didn't want them separated either, but if Hal missed this opportunity, he might remain stuck in that container indefinitely. Lucy needed stability as much as Hal did. In my heart, I believed Lucy would understand eventually. So Hal decided to take the transitional housing bed, determined to use it as a springboard to a better future for him and Lucy. We arranged for Lucy to stay at the rescue center for a trial period, with daily visits from Hal when he wasn't at his volunteer shift or sorting out job applications. When the day came for Hal to move, Lucy seemed to sense the impending separation. She whined, nuzzling at Hal's hand while we stood in front of the rescue center. Hal blinked rapidly, holding back tears. "I'll come see you every day," he promised, voice shaking. Lucy licked his hand once, then allowed the volunteer to lead her inside, her head hanging low. My own eyes burned watching them part. Was this truly the best option? I reminded myself there was no perfect solution in a world this messy. Hal settled into the transitional housing, an experience both relieving and alien for him. He struggled with the rules at first, the curfews, the sense of being monitored. But he had a roof, a bed, a shower. Meanwhile, Lucy adapted surprisingly well to the rescue center. She was anxious the first day, barking at unfamiliar dogs, ignoring food. But the staff treated her gently, letting her explore the yard at her own pace. By the third day, she was calmer, though always hyper-alert when visitors arrived, hoping to see Hal. And Hal did come. He showed up at the rescue every evening, no matter how tired he was from volunteering or job hunting. Lucy's joy at seeing him was radiant, her tail wagging so hard that her entire body shook. It nearly broke my heart to watch them cling to each other for those brief visiting minutes. As the days turned into weeks, small victories accumulated. Hal landed a part-time job cleaning the rescue center's kennels and assisting with feeding routines. He was good at it. His gentle touch soothed anxious dogs. Lucy thrived on having Hal around for a few hours each day. At night, though, Hal had to return to the housing program. Meanwhile, Cinnamon had fully recovered, playing joyfully in his yard. Reported that she seemed ready for adoption, though his wife was getting attached. Hal visited her once, Lucy by his side, and the reunion was a flurry of wagging tails. In those moments, I remembered how all this started, following Lucy through the city's underbelly. How each choice had led us here, forging an unbreakable bond across species and circumstance. Then, a phone call changed everything. The transitional housing coordinator informed Hal that a small studio apartment was available through a low-income support initiative. He qualified, especially because of his volunteer work and documented job hours. There was paperwork to finalize, but if it all went through, Hal would have a real place of his own. More than that, the complex allowed pets. Hal relayed the news to me, voice shaking with excitement. Lucy could finally live with him. Hope electrified the air. Still, there were hurdles. The deposit, some basic furniture, the question of how Hal would afford monthly expenses even with a part-time job. I reached out to community forums and local charities, explaining Hal's situation without revealing private details he didn't want shared. My friend pitched in, offering an old futon. The rescue center volunteers donated dishes and linens. One woman gifted a gently used dog bed, embroidered with a small heart. The outpouring of generosity left Hal speechless. For a man who had felt invisible, the support was overwhelming. The day Hal signed the lease, Lucy was right there with him. Though not officially inside the housing office, she waited outside, tail wagging as though she sensed the significance. Hal stepped out, keys in hand, tears shining in his eyes. "We have a place," he choked out, dropping to his knees to hug Lucy around the neck. My friend and I stood by, lumps in our throats. Who would have believed this was possible only weeks ago? Moving day was a small, triumphant procession. I borrowed a van from a neighbor, loaded up the futon, the dog bed, a modest array of donated household items, and off we went. Lucy rode with Hal in the passenger seat, occasionally poking her nose out the window. The new studio was tiny, a single room, a kitchenette, and a small bathroom, but it was clean and bright, with a window overlooking a patch of grass. Hal walked in, Lucy at his heels, and just stood there taking it all in. A home, sheltered from the cold, from the uncertainty of living day to day. He turned to me, voice trembling. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, eyes brimming with emotion. Lucy circled the space, sniffing at every corner, her tail a perpetual blur. "You already have," I replied, echoing that same sentiment I felt when we first saved Cinnamon. Watching this moment was more reward than I ever needed. In the weeks that followed, Hal settled into a routine. He continued volunteering at the rescue center, eventually picking up more hours as he proved reliable. Lucy adjusted to indoor life with surprising ease, relishing the simple comforts of a soft bed and a consistently full bowl of dog food. She still had her street smarts, occasionally eyeing the door as if she remembered her wandering days, but she seemed content to stay by Hal's side. And his wife decided they couldn't part with Cinnamon after all. Their home had become her home. On the day they officially adopted her, Hal and Lucy visited to celebrate, and the dogs romped in the yard like old friends. We humans watched, tears in our eyes. A sense of closure blanketed the scene, two strays, each finding a stable future in different homes, yet forever linked by a single day's remarkable rescue. Looking back, I marvel at how the simplest decision, to follow a stray dog, reverberated through so many lives. Sometimes I picture Lucy rummaging through trash that morning, how easily I could have walked away, ignoring that pull of curiosity. I think about Hal, lonely and fading in a shipping container, and how Lucy's unwavering loyalty tethered him to hope. Cinnamon, broken and bleeding in an alley, on the brink of death, saved by the unstoppable chain reaction of compassion. And me, someone who believed my life was complete, left forever changed by the raw humility and kindness I discovered along those dingy city streets. Today, Hal and I remain close. I visit his studio often. We chat about life, about how he's saving up to eventually move to a slightly bigger place, maybe find room for Lucy to have a yard. He laughs more now, an easy, unguarded sound that I can't recall hearing when we first met. Lucy greets me with exuberant barks and sloppy kisses, wagging her tail so hard that it might just propel her into flight one day. Each time, I kneel to scratch behind her ears, remembering the moment I first saw her rummaging for scraps. She glances up at me with those soulful eyes, and I imagine she's saying, "See what we can do when we all stick together." Sometimes Hal and I take Lucy to the park. On warm afternoons, we sit on a bench feeding the ducks stale bread, Lucy lying at our feet. See just another dog owner chatting with a friend, never guessing the extraordinary path that brought us here. Hal no longer wears the same weary expression. He's grown a little heavier with regular meals, a little more confident. He jokes about Lucy's fussiness, how she refuses certain brands of kibble now that she's had a taste of the good life. We share a laugh, and Lucy seems to grin right along with us. Whenever I look into Lucy's eyes, I recall the day that started it all. How that fleeting spark of curiosity and concern led me down uncharted roads, past city barriers and into hidden places of heartache and hope. She is in many ways the architect of our unlikely family. Because of Lucy, Hal was seen. Because of Lucy, Cinnamon was rescued. Because of Lucy, I found a purpose that transcended my everyday routine. I've learned that sometimes the smallest gestures, like feeding a stray or following a trembling dog, can ripple into astonishing transformations. Late at night, I sometimes lie awake thinking about Lucy's old life. The painful nights on the streets, the rejections, the near misses. I wonder what she saw in me that morning, why she let me follow her when I was just another stranger. Part of me believes she was looking for help, not for herself but for someone else. Another part imagines she was guided by some intuition, perhaps the same intangible force that compelled me to follow. Regardless, the result is a testament to the quiet wonders of empathy. I share this story with anyone willing to listen. The reaction is almost always the same: wide-eyed astonishment, followed by a rush of tears, then a surge of hope. People want to believe that goodness exists, that love and kindness can flourish in the most desolate of places. Lucy's tale is proof of that. It's a reminder that we are all connected by invisible threads of compassion, waiting only for the moment we dare to act. And it stirs in people the impulse to be braver in their empathy, more open with their hearts. Life goes on, of course. Not every stray finds a home. Not every homeless person experiences a sudden turnaround. But Lucy's journey shows what's possible when just one person cares enough to take that first step. We are not powerless amid the world's problems. We're often paralyzed by the illusion that one action can't change anything. Yet one action saved Cinnamon's life, gave Hal a future, and transformed my understanding of humanity. Now, months later, when I walk the streets of this city, my eyes are different. I notice hidden corners, glimpses of vulnerability, stray animals, the homeless leaning in doorways. I see them, truly see them, and I carry Lucy's spirit with me, an unspoken promise to do what I can. Sometimes it's a donation, sometimes it's a conversation, and sometimes it's as simple as acknowledging another person's existence. Because ignoring them never makes them disappear. We owe each other acknowledgement, if nothing else. The biggest surprise is how far the story has reached. A local reporter caught wind of the rescue. She interviewed Hal, Lucy by his side, and wrote a heartfelt article that circulated widely on social media. People were moved by the unlikely friendship between a stray dog and a homeless man, by the rescue of a mortally wounded pup, by the chain reaction that ended with Hal and Lucy sharing a home. Donations flowed to the rescue center, allowing them to expand their services. A wave of volunteer sign-ups followed. Some read the story and decided to adopt an animal. Others were inspired to help in outreach programs for the homeless. Lucy's and Hal's story resonated like a beacon, lighting a path to empathy for countless strangers. But the core of it remains deeply personal, etched into my memory in the subtlest details. The smell of wet pavement, the quiet dignity in Hal's eyes, the frantic wag of Lucy's tail, and the fragile breath of the injured dog in a dark alley. I cherish these memories, partly because they remind me that life can be astonishingly beautiful even in its harshest corners. Lucy is not just a stray dog anymore. She is a testament to the power of loyalty and unconditional love. Hal is not just a homeless man, but a testament to human resilience and the possibility of rebuilding from ruins. Cinnamon is not just a wounded stray, but a testament to how quickly the tide can turn when caring hands intervene. And I am just someone who followed a stray dog one day, only to stumble into a story so rich in emotional truth that I can never go back to the way I was before. Whenever someone asks me why I risked so much time and energy on a single stray dog, I tell them it never felt like a risk at all. From that first glance, Lucy drew me in with an unspoken promise that something extraordinary was about to unfold. And she was right, because that day I learned that in a world filled with noise and indifference, there can still be these miraculous little events, incidents where love threads its way through heartbreak, weaving a tapestry of second chances. We followed a stray dog for a day, and what we found wasn't just a surprise. It was a profound affirmation that hope and kindness can exist anywhere, in anyone, at any time. All we have to do is open our eyes and our hearts and follow where the journey leads.